I'm informal in the way that I go about my work. And I'm very professional. Like I keep confidentiality and privacy. That's very, very serious because I do have a license. But what I mean by that is like when I talk to people, when I talk to students, instead of saying COVID, I say Rona to kind of like, make it kind of light. I use art in my physical space to let students know that, we're not all just this professional type of like robotic person. That there's color in my life, there's imagery.
Thank you for joining me today at the Biggest Little Podcast. Today, I have the honor to interview one of my friends and colleague here at the University of Nevada, Reno. Her name is Jahahi Mazariego. All of you should know her and admire the work that she does just in our community. She's a huge advocate for DACA students, for students that are underrepresented, and she makes her voice loud and clear. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with your friends. I would really appreciate it, and follow us on Instagram. Hey girl, welcome and thank you so much. Please go ahead, introduce yourself.
My name is Jahahi, and I go by that, but as like a professional name. But my artist name, I go by Jahi, and that was a name that my brother gave me when I was super little because he couldn't say Jahahi. But to be really honest, my real pronunciation of my name is Jahahi. But Jahahi is way too long. Jahahi is like middle, it's okay, and Jahi is just much easier. But in the professional space, it's Jahahi, and that's what I'm known for. But my name came from a dream my dad had right before he met my mom. And my dad's a pastor, so very religious and spiritual. And he said that God told him to name his first daughter Jahahi. And well, I'm the first daughter. And so that's my name. And everyone else in my family has like your regular Latino name, but nah. Mine is definitely not Spanish. There's too many H's in my name, so you won't even pronounce it in Spanish. So
that's... Is this like your legal name, like when it's like your social security card?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's my legal name. It's my government name. It's like when people joke around. Yeah, it's my government name. Mm-hmm.
With the two H's, like, well, Jahahi, or like, is it just Jahahi?
No, so Jahahi is just with two H's. It just sounds like there's more, but it's just two H's. They're both spelled the same. It's just the way that my dad pronounces it and how he taught me. So that remains the same except for my artist name. It'll go Jahi, just much easier. And it's funny because when I was talking to like my doctor and my therapist, I usually, when I talk about myself personally, I will always say Jahi. But whenever I talk about my work, I call myself Jahahi.
That's so awesome. I thought it was so special on last Saturday how you told us that Jahi was like your friend's name, like that's like the identity you like to go by with people that you feel comfortable with. So I'm like, that's so cool. Like you get to be that person,
Yeah. I mean, it kind of just happened. But I separated those two different names and my two different identities because of the work that I do. Because like with immigration, it impacts me personally and professionally. And the issue with that is, well, it's not an issue, but a concern that I usually have for myself is like, how do I separate these two different worlds that impacts me so greatly? And how do I continue to do the work that I do, but also keep those boundaries? And so like, for some reason, my name kind of just helps.
Yes.
In what I do. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So you say you're an artist. What kind of art you do? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so I'm a self-taught artist. I started drawing when I was 6 years old. I didn't like talking in class. I'm actually very shy and introverted. But in first grade, my teacher saw that I wouldn't talk, but she encouraged me to draw out what I was reading. So she knew that I was comprehending the material. And since then, I was just like, I actually really like this. And so I've taken my art a bit more seriously within the last 2 years, but I started painting portraits 10 years ago. And about 10 years ago, I realized like there wasn't a lot of people that look like my mom or my sister. There's a lot of people that look like me as a white Latina, but I realized I have this special skill set. Let me paint and draw people who are racially and ethnically diverse. And so I paint just completely just women of color for the most part, unless I'm commissioned, but I usually charge them hella money if it's outside of my scope, outside of women of color, to paint them. And so what I often paint about is things related to immigration. And so I have this series where I paint my family members, and then I use the border wall as a motif, and I paint it onto their shoulders. I mean, you know, if this was visual, I'll really break it down to you, like what symbolisms I use, but definitely use a lot of symbolism. I talk about I paint about generational trauma in my paintings, but it's very social justice, very social worky type of paintings. But again, I can't separate those two. I am very political. My body is politicized, so therefore everything I do is political.
Yes, girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to touch on the generational trauma just because I feel like in the field that we do, we're very familiarized with, right? Like I think when it comes to like education and the system that we work in, it's just very, well, generation after generation, it's here, it's ingrained in what we do, you know? And I know you've said it before, sometimes it becomes really heavy on us. And it's like hard to help, you know, the students. But with the generational trauma, like tell us more about it. What is it? And in what spaces as like Latina women we can see it, like for somebody who has no experience with generational trauma?
Yeah. So I first heard about generational trauma after talking to another social work friend who went to Dr. Joy Degree's seminar about post-traumatic slave syndrome. I think that's how she said it, and I may be butchering it completely, but and how this social work researcher did research on African Americans who have connections with the slave trade, and how their trauma is manifested through generation. So like that's something that was super interested in me, to see how trauma impacts not just the person who received it, but also their children and their children's children and generations and generations. So that's where the term generational trauma comes into play. But why I was really interested in is because I am daughter of Salvadorian immigrants. My parents, experienced and endured the Civil War in El Salvador from 1980s to 1992. They left halfway through, but there was a lot of build-up of violence before 1980. But my dad suffered a lot, joined a gang when he migrated to the U.S., and so he has a lot of trauma from the Civil War, but also from being in gangs. And my mom is the complete opposite. She did experience trauma because of the Civil War, but she was also a nurse in the Civil War, and so she would help the los pueblitos, los guerrilleros, and like healing them, giving them medicine. And so she also has trauma too. And so they always talked about it. Me growing up, and I was always just interested about the trauma and how it manifests. But I also realized how their trauma impacted my mental health and impacted my behaviors, and also how I socialize. And so I bring that knowledge into the work that I do, because I predominantly work with Latinx students, and I don't work with like exclusively with just Salvadorians or like Central Americans, but I see generational trauma with students. And I recognize it, I call it out, and I give them a name so they can also start learning and unpacking and healing from the generational trauma that they face too. And so that's how I'm not a therapist, but the services I provide is therapeutic in a way, because I'm able to identify and give them a name, and hopefully they take that information and seek the help that they definitely deserve to get.
Yes, definitely. I think oftentimes there's like a burden, you know, that we carry, and not knowing what it's like even with imposter syndrome. I remember the first time that I heard the term and I identify with it, like it was like in a speech in a graduation, I think. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I feel like that sometimes, you know, when I go to class, or now when I'm, you know, in a space that I feel like I don't belong because it's predominantly white, or as a young professional, everybody else is older than me, you know, like there's a lot of spaces that I'm like, oh my goodness, like is this for me? Like somebody's gonna find out that I don't know enough, like, or even helping students out, like, with their FAFSA. I'm like, do you know what this is? Like, what's a Schedule 2? Like, there's all these terms and identities that it comes with, knowing what I'm feeling. And I think once identified that a lot of people go through it and feel the same way, it was very relieving. And I was like, that's nice to know I'm not the only one.
Yeah, and I mean, that's definitely what I try to do. Normalize this feeling of inadequacy in predominantly white institutions. Giving out names like white institutions, what that is, defining it for students, educating them, and not in traditional ways. And I mean by that, but like giving them the real happenings of what it is to be a college student, being a Latina or Latino, Latinx, and how that impacts your mind, body, and in the way that you go through academics. I try to keep it as real as possible, because talking about imposter syndrome, I felt at the first of my higher education career, because I worked as a social worker outside of the university way before. I didn't feel imposter syndrome, but I felt it here when I first started. And so I felt like I had to fit into this mold. And that, again, and I hold a lot of privilege. Like, I'm white, like I'm a white Latina. And I say that like a lot because it's important to say it, that my experiences are so different. But what I decided to do is that I cannot do really great work if I'm not also authentic to myself and I'm authentic to others. So I jokingly say, but I really mean it, that I'm informal in the way that I go about my work. And I'm very professional. Like, I keep confidentiality and privacy. That's very, very serious, because I do have a license. But what I mean by that is, like, when I talk to people, when I talk to students, instead of saying COVID, I say Rona to kind of like, make it kind of light. I use art in my physical space to let students know that, we're not all just this professional type of like robotic person, but there's color in my life, there's imagery.
Reassuring that I do indeed belong here. But yeah, I can relate a lot. I haven't been to your office, but even just like looking at the background, but Ricky's office is like everything student related.
Yes, it's a bit, it's all over. And I'm actually very minimalist. Like, I don't like to put a lot of stuff, but again, the stuff that I put is intentionally there for a reason. And a lot of the art that I have here is actually given from students. And so I want them to see that I value your artwork. I value your willingness to give me something so precious and intimate that I'm going to put it up.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. So the set of questions that I had prepared is more about like who you are, like in your daily life, like do you have a morning routine? They're like very quick questions, so don't mind, like, you just don't overthink them. But do you have like a favorite book or podcast you listen to, you recommend?
I wish I could read more. I mean, I should read more, but I'm not good on like long novels. I actually do enjoy poetry books. It's very artistic, like that's my thing. And what is, oh my goodness, I can't remember the book's name, but my favorite author is K.Y. Robinson. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but it's super beautiful. She's a Black woman, but she talks about her experience as a Black woman in the poetry book so raw and colorful and very detailed. And I love that because I'm a very imagery type of, I'm a painter. So like, I like to imagine things. And so her poetry allows me to do that. And so that's my favorite type of book. In terms of like podcasts, I'm also like a really hopeless romantic. And I'm not talking about, yeah, it sucks. And I'm not only just like talking about like intimate romance. I'm talking about just like bond and just intimacy within like platonic relationships and family. And so I listen to More to Love podcast. I think that's what it's called. And I found it through NPR because I love NPR, but right now I'm taking a break from it just because everything just seems so sad. But oh no, it's not More to Love, it's Modern Love. Is where like Yes, modern love. And so it talks about love, but it's not in your traditional romantic, heteronormative type of love. It's about love for yourself, love for people, love for your family, love
Mm.
for like really difficult issues, and then you become to love yourself. And so I like listening to that. And then because I'm a social worker, I like self-help type of podcasts. And the one that I like is Help Me Be Me. And
Helping.
so and so, as a therapist talking to you about dating anxiety, other type of anxiety, and self worth and stuff like that. And so, whenever I'm feeling anxious in my office, I listen to it and I kind of just meditate in what she's saying. Hmm.
That's awesome. I love listening to things like it's either like listening or smells. Like I'll put like essential oils or like I'll make sure my office smells like a specific way just so it makes it feel like it's my office.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So talking about routine, that's exactly what I do. So I have this wax melter, and I save all the candle wax that I burn at home, and I keep it and I mold it and I bring it to my office. So that's the first thing that I do. And then the other thing that I do every morning is I turn on my little Bluetooth and I put on my music. I make playlists based on my feelings,
Oh.
and and
Like
so I'm
llorar
always
en español, llorar en inglés.
yeah, something like that. I'm not much of a Spanish like music type of person, but like I'm definitely into like neo soul R&B type of music. So
Hmm.
I have a feelings playlist, and I'm always listening to it because I'm always in my feelings. But
Oh.
I'm an emotional person. I'm a social worker, so I can't just help like not feeling
Yeah.
emotional.
What's your sign? Are you Pisces?
No, I'm actually, I only know this because my sister, figured it out for me. But my sun is a Taurus, my rising is a Virgo, and my moon is a Capricorn. And I am very like down to earth, and yeah, that is very true to who I am.
Wow. I don't think I've ever met that combination. I
No,
think they're hard to find.
no, and like I said, it's very true to who I am. I'm very calm. Even in moments of crisis, I can still rationalize and find solution. Again, this is kind of why it worked out that I'm a social worker, because I'm able to like be calm in front of my students and then figure out this is what you can do.
Yes.
Yeah, so it just makes sense. And no, in high school, everyone thought I was like on something because I was just so relaxed and chill all the time. But I'm like, no, this is just my personality.
I promise. Oh man. All right. So what's your morning routine? Like I know this is like you're at home, like other than like listening to music, like is there something specific that you like to do?
Yeah. So in the morning, I always drink my coffee. And I'm a plain coffee drinker. I just need coffee and then a splash of almond milk, and then I'm chill. No sugar or anything like that. I've removed it from my diet completely, partly because I just didn't like how I reacted with sugar. And I
Mm.
also have PCOS. So I have to be really mindful of my food intake and all that stuff. And so I eat 3 meals a day. So I prepare that. Well, I don't prepare. I meal prep, and then in the morning I put that all in my lunchbox. So I'm snacking all day. But really, in the morning when I get to work, on my way to work, I listen to music. Like I really love music. And so, um, and I just like sitting in the car. That's my routine. And no, I'm really basic. So I'll have like a
It's
really extreme morning routine. I mean, I do put on my eyebrows. Like that's my part of my morning routine. It's important.
yes, I know. Going without eyebrows, that's when it's a rough day.
Yeah, not only that, like I need students to know how I'm reacting and feeling with my eyebrows.
Are they like pretty like rare or like
No, I have eyebrows. I just like to put them in.
oh okay. I know some people who like my boyfriend, he has like half of the eyebrow, but it's like fuzz. Like
No, I'm blessed with long eyebrow hairs. I just like to make them look kind of cute.
that's good. Okay, so what advice would you give your younger self? Like I know I have like 25-year-old because I really want to know like what advice I can take, but a younger self, like what would you say?
25 years, and that was like a couple years ago for me. It's what would I tell myself? I think what I would probably tell myself is that the most important relationship you will have is with yourself, as cheesy as that sounds. It really is, because no one can bring you as much joy as you can bring yourself. You know yourself the most, the best. And to check in with yourself mentally and physically too, and to not ignore your physical self saying there's something wrong within your body, or there's something that's changing. I think I didn't realize that I neglected my physical self for too long because I wanted to address the mental first. But I'm like, you can't do that. They work, together. And so I wish I would been much more self-aware when I was 25 years old. And again, no, that wasn't that long ago. But I'm just messing. But yeah, just to be much more self-aware, and to be okay with where I'm at. And this idea that I will be like married, having children at 25, dude, it may not happen at that age, and that is totally okay. I feel, yeah, and as I get older, I'm much more relaxed about this idea of like being married and having children and things like that, because really what I love right now is just loving myself for the first time in almost 30 years. And so I'm loving this journey of self-discovery.
That is so cool. So on the other side, what is the worst advice someone gave you?
It's hard to say who anyone gave me worse advice, because honestly, I've like worked really hard to like not engage with people that I know that's not there to empower me or uplift me. The only thing I could think of is, and I'm happy I didn't really take those people who are trying to give me negative advice in the past. But I guess I do have to say, because I'm talking out loud, but I've had multiple experiences from Latina women in professional settings always doubting my ability to go to school full time and then work full time. Like, I've gotten that by Latino women, and it's always Latino women who's like bringing me down. And so like I said, I didn't take their advice. I graduated, so I'm past that. But I think what I also would tell myself then is that, going back to what I initially said, is like, the most important opinions is yourselves, your own opinions. And so I'm happy I didn't take it. It would have brought me down a lot more in doubt myself and getting a master's degree. But ya lo hice, so whatever.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
here.
It's so hard because at the same time, so I think this is something I can relate to you, because I do have a full-time job here at UNR, and taking advantage of the grant and aid and, all the resources that we have to like pursue a master's degree, but then at the same time, your workload and then your school load, it's like, I don't want to be here for 3 years, or I don't want to be here for an extra year, like that's money and time that you're like, let's just push ourselves, and I think we know our limits. But it is sad when women that we look up to and we see ourselves in like doubt us, and we have other conversations like, oh, great job, like keep going, like te echan ánimos, but that's the sad reality of other things.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you know yourself the best, and to listen to what they have to say, because some of the stuff that older Latina women, they gone through some stuff. So take what you need and leave everything back if you don't need it. But what I do actually for myself, and I started doing this when I turned, okay, no, I was gonna say 25, but that's not true. When I turned 22 or 23 years old, every birthday, I write a letter to my future self. 1 year ahead. So I open it every birthday. I read a letter that I wrote a year ago, and I write myself like, this is what you've accomplished. This is what I hope you accomplish by this time next year. This is what I love about you, and I hope you love yourself more or the same or whatever it is. And I've been doing that for the last, how old am I? 28. So in the last 5 years. So I have a whole bunch of love letters to myself. Again, this is part of like, you gotta love yourself the most and fiercely. And I've been trying to do that. And I've been doing that for some time. So that's the best advice.
Yes,
I
I
want to give.
love that. I think I'm gonna start doing that to myself.
Hmm.
Because I've been wanting to start this podcast for quite some time now. Like since I graduated, I think I went through like a really dark time where I think I was working so hard towards graduation that once it happened, I didn't have a long-term goal that I was working towards, and then I got stuck like teaching fifth grade. I loved it, don't get me wrong, but it was just like a hard identity to like embrace. Like I didn't go to school to be a teacher. I was, super underpaid. I just couldn't afford the lifestyle that I had dreamed of, and then like not going to school was like, what's my identity now as a young professional? So I think having a voice and like doing things for yourself that you can look back to, I think it's so cool, which I can't wait to listen, to this podcast like in 3 years or, 3 months even. Like I'm excited to see where I was and where I'm now.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think the love letters to yourself is very unique. I like it.
Hmm.
I see where people like set goals and do things, and then go back. But I think that love letter is like super special.
Yeah. No, and then that's the thing. Very intentional in writing these letters. I don't set goals because then once I read it in a year, if I set a goal and I don't meet it, then I tend to be hard on myself.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. I just want to remember how awesome that I am and how accomplished I am. And I don't mean that like career wise, I actually mean that personally. How accomplished you are, how much in love you are with yourself, and how does that manifest now, a year from now? And so I started doing that not with this intention that I'm writing love letters to myself, but because my social work professor, my undergrad, said, write a letter to yourself in 6 months. So after you graduate, you'll get this like in December or November. And she mailed it out to us. And I read the letter. And during the time, my family was being separated by deportation. And so I wrote about, I hope by this time that you're somewhat okay with what happened. It's okay for now because it sucks. And then what else did I say about myself? I don't know. It was something uplifting, but I thought I need to continue on doing this because I didn't think I would make it this far 6 months from now. And so I haven't stopped since then.
Yeah. And it's even such a short time, like 6 months. I think 6 months like from now, we were starting COVID, like we were sent home to, who knows when. And I don't think we had, an idea of what it was going to be like. I think we had ideas of like, oh, maybe April, June. And then summer came and it's like, well, everything's online until fall. And then fall came and we're like, oh, let's go back online. So I think the uncertainty of things um, can change so fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so those are all the questions that I have, but is there anything else that you would like to add to our listeners for any advice or, life guidance that you've learned in your lifespan?
I think the only thing I could think of, just because you slightly mentioned it, and we're speaking with an audience that is in your mid 20s or early 20s, maybe just graduating from college and trying to figure our life out. It's my only thing I could say is it's okay if you don't know what you want to do.
Mhm.
Check in with yourself to see like what actually genuinely brings you joy, and go with it and figure it out. Like y'all are resilient, y'all made it this far for a reason. So it's okay if there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're in a pandemic, so yeah, there will continue to be uncertainty. Um, but it's fine to not know what you do, and I feel very fortunate that I've never been in that position of what I want to do career wise, but I've felt like that in many other parts of my personal life too. Like, what would the future look like? So, don't put pressure on yourself. It's okay that you do because that might be motivating, but, you know, you're doing the best that you can do, and that's okay.
That is. So what's next? Like, what's your next project? What are you working on? I know you have so many things on your plate. You graduated. Like, what is Jahahi doing next?
I am gonna focus on myself. And so, what I mean by that, and I've been trying to do that too,
Hmm.
is deal with my chronic illnesses and manage that, but also like go out there and find companionship, friendships, love in many different, whatever that looks like, right? But what I also hope to do is paint more. I want to put my art out there. I have stories to tell through my art. And so like I want people to see it. And I believe in that social justice and protests are, protest is just a small part of social justice movements. But Angela Davis always talked about how art can be really a big, important part of the social justice and racial justice movement. And so utilize it to uplift communities, to talk about the issues. And so I'm hoping that my art, no, I know that my art does that. And so I want it to be much more visible in spaces that's not intended, like art's not intended to be there. And I'm thinking about like a pupuseria, like my Salvadorian restaurants. I want them to know about the Salvadorian diaspora, like speaking as a Salvadorian American, what has that looked like for me growing up in Reno as a Salvadorian and as American. And so that's my next project. I'm gonna ask someone to put my art there.
Yes.
So people could be eating pupusas and yuca frita, and then they'll be looking at my art.
But yes, I think there's a couple of places in town, no?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but you can definitely like, hey, purchase my art.
Yeah, no, there's the Rincon is like a place that I always uplift, partly because they were my neighbors, but I genuinely love their food.
Where is it at?
Greenbrae Drive, I think, and Pyramid Highway. So it's in Sparks.
Okay, I need to go get some. I usually go to what's the one on Audi? El Paisano. Yeah. That's okay. And then there's this other El Pulgarcito. I think some Mexican Salvadorian food. But I need to go to Rincon now.
Rincon, yes, like they're family to my family. Like my dad is so comfortable there. He literally just walks back to the kitchen and just says hi to the owner.
Yeah, like,
yeah, basically, and they're super sweet. And they well, obviously we kind of grew up together, so they recognize me. But I've seen their physical restaurant grow over the decade, and so like I just like to uplift them. And it's funny because they cook mint. They cook with mint sometimes in their foods. And the mint that they use in the restaurant is actually originated from the garden that my mom had, the mint tree that she had, or bush or whatever, in the front yard. So I always think about the mint that they're eating there is actually came from the mint bush that we had in the front yard.
That is so cool. So where can people find your art? Like on social media? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, definitely social media. I am not going to lie. I'm not going to put my social media out there because I am very political, and I talked a little bit about my job. So again, I'm keeping that separate, but y'all know my artist name. I'm not that hard to look up.
That is true. Your name is very unique. Okay. Well, I'm so excited to see your art throughout town and eat some pupusas and continue to share spaces with you. I feel like whenever I see you, I like seeing other young Latina women, that I think our generation, we identify a lot more with all the issues we've lived, like recessions, migration, political aspects, and also being able to relate, to the work we do with our students. Yeah. Thank you so much for accepting this invite. It means a lot. I'm excited for people to meet this other side and get to know the line of work that we do. Because I think oftentimes like they either glorify that we work, in this space, or they underestimate, our ability to do the work that we do. So thank you, Jahahi. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe on our podcast, Spotify, Apple, any stream that you guys are listening to the podcast today. Please follow us on Instagram and leave us a comment on any future topics that you'd like to hear on the Biggest Little Podcast. My name is Andrea Saavedra, and thank you so much. See you soon.